The morning of his ex-wife's wedding began with a stain. It bloomed across the front of Owen Mercer's only decent shirt like a cruel joke. Dark coffee spreading over pale blue fabric while sunlight poured through the kitchen window. His 5-year-old son, Caleb, stood frozen beside the table, lower lip trembling, tiny hands still wrapped around the mug that had slipped. For a long moment, Owen just stared at the stain, not at the shirt, not at the mess, at the symbol of it. Another reminder that life had not gone according to plan. 3 years ago, he had imagined himself standing at an altar, beside Mara, promising forever. Now he was standing alone in a cramped apartment kitchen, trying to scrub coffee from his shirt so he could attend her wedding to another man. Caleb's voice cracked as he whispered that he was sorry, and just like that, the weight in Owen's chest softened. He knelt, pulled his son close, and told him it was only a shirt. But he knew the truth. It wasn't just a shirt. It was pride, dignity, unfinished grief, and the quiet fear of being seen as the man who lost. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Deep Night Stories. Stories like this remind us that even broken mornings can lead to unexpected miracles. Owen hadn't planned to go to the wedding. When the cream envelope had arrived weeks ago, embossed with gold script and Mara's elegant new surname-to-be, he had tossed it onto the counter and left it there for days. He told himself he didn't care, that he had moved on, that he was too busy juggling double shifts at the hardware store and bedtime stories to think about old love. But Caleb had found the invitation. He had asked innocent questions about why Mommy was marrying someone else and whether Daddy would be there. Owen saw, and gave quiet. Owen saw confusion in his son's eyes, and he made a decision he wasn't ready for. He would go, not for Mara, not for closure, but so Caleb could see that adults could stand tall even when their hearts were bruised. The problem was he didn't have a date. The wedding was being held at a sprawling botanical estate on the edge of the city, in broad daylight under a glass pavilion that gleamed like a jewel in the sun. Mara's fiancé, Grant Holloway, came from money. The guest list would be full of polished smiles and tailored suits. Owen could already imagine the sideways glances, the quiet whispers about the ex-husband who couldn't keep his marriage together. He told himself he didn't need anyone on his arm, but loneliness has a way of echoing louder in crowded rooms. That morning, after dropping Caleb at his mother's for the day, Owen drove through downtown to clear his head. The city was alive with sunlight bouncing off windows and people moving with purpose. He stopped at a red light near the old railway bridge, where tents and cardboard shelters lined the sidewalk like forgotten footnotes. That was when he saw her. She stood near the curb, not begging, not shouting, just holding a small cardboard sign that read, "Trying to start over." Her clothes were worn but clean. Her hair, deep chestnut brown, was tied back loosely. There was something in her posture that didn't match the others around her. A quiet dignity, a kind of fragile resilience. Traffic moved, but Owen found himself pulling into a nearby parking lot instead of driving on more. He didn't know what he was doing. Maybe it was impulse. Maybe it was the raw ache of the day. Maybe it was the way her eyes met his when he approached, steady and unashamed. Her name was Serafina Vale. She told him she had lost her job 6 months earlier after the small publishing company she worked for shut down. Rent had slipped through her fingers like sand. Family ties were thin and strained. One setback had turned into 10. She spoke without self-pity, as though narrating someone else's life. Owen bought her lunch from the corner cafe. They sat on a sun-warmed bench, paper bags between them. She thanked him with a sincerity that made him uncomfortable, as though he had done something heroic instead of simply human. And then the wild thought slipped out before he could stop it. He asked if she would consider accompanying him to a wedding that afternoon. The words hung between them, absurd and reckless. He half expected her to laugh or walk away, but she didn't. She studied him with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. He explained, clumsily that it was his ex-wife's wedding, that he didn't want to look pitiful, that he didn't want his son to think his father was alone in the world. He promised it would only be for a few hours. He would buy her a dress, pay her for her time, no strings. Just two strangers helping each other survive a difficult day. Serafina didn't answer immediately. The wind lifted a strand of her hair, and she tucked it behind her ear. She admitted she hadn't been inside a formal venue in years, that she used to love weddings because they felt like the start of something hopeful. Finally, she said yes. The next few hours felt surreal. Owen took her to a small boutique on the outskirts of town, one that specialized in discounted formal wear. The shop owner eyed them skeptically at first, but Serafina moved through the racks with surprising confidence. She chose a soft emerald dress that caught the light in a way that made her eyes seem brighter. Owen bought her a simple pair of heels, and arranged for her turf heels, and arranged for a quick appointment at a budget salon nearby. When she emerged an hour later, Owen almost didn't recognize her, not because she looked like someone else, but because she looked like who she might have always been beneath the layers of hardship. The transformation wasn't about glamour, it was about restoration. She stood taller. Her smile reached her eyes. They drove to the estate under a sky so blue it seemed painted. The grounds were breathtaking. Manicured lawns stretching toward a glass pavilion, where white chairs were arranged in neat rows. Sunlight streamed through the transparent ceiling, scattering reflections across polished floors. Guests milled about in pastel suits and flowing dresses, champagne flutes catching the light. Owen felt the old insecurities creeping up his spine, but when Serafina slipped her hand gently through his arm, something shifted. It wasn't possessive. It wasn't romantic. It was steadying. Whispers began almost immediately. People recognized Owen. They glanced at Serafina, curious, assessing. Mara stood at the far end of the pavilion, radiant in a lace gown that shimmered in the daylight. For a heartbeat, Owen's chest tightened. This had once been his future. But then Caleb ran toward him from the children's table, grinning. He hugged his father's leg and looked up at Serafina with open curiosity. She knelt to his level, complimented his tiny bow tie, and within minutes had him laughing. The ceremony unfolded in a blur of vows and applause. Owen listened politely, clapping when everyone else did. He felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Watching Mara promise forever to someone else closed a chapter he had known was still half open. At the reception, tables were arranged beneath the midday sun, shaded by elegant white canopies. The string quartet played softly in the background. Conversations hummed. Serafina didn't clow. Ingdoan, she mingled with an ease that surprised him, speaking to elderly relatives, complimenting floral arrangements, helping an overwhelmed bridesmaid adjust a fallen strap. Her warmth drew people in. But then came the moment that changed everything. Grant's father, a prominent investor known for his sharp tongue, took the microphone to give a toast. He made a passing joke about learning from past mistakes, glancing pointedly in Owen's direction. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter spread through the crowd. Owen felt heat rise to his face. He was used to swallowing humiliation quietly, but before he could retreat into himself, Serafina stepped forward. She didn't grab the microphone in defiance. She waited until the toast ended, until the polite applause faded. Then she approached Mara and Grant with a serene smile and asked if she might say a few words as someone who believed in new beginnings. There was hesitation, but curiosity won. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly across the sunlit pavilion. She spoke about resilience, about how love sometimes fails, not because people are bad, but because they are growing in different directions. She spoke about courage, the courage to let go and the courage to try again. She never mentioned Owen directly, yet somehow defended him with grace. She reminded everyone that every person in that room had faced loss or regret, that compassion costs nothing but changes everything. The earlier joke about mistakes shrank into insignificance beneath the weight of her sincerity. Silence followed her words. Not awkward silence, reverent silence. Then applause erupted. genuine and loud. Mara's expression softened. Grant's father looked momentarily chastened. And Owen stood there, stunned, not because she had spoken beautifully, but because she had seen him, truly seen him. Not as a failure, not as the ex-husband, but as a human being deserving of dignity. The rest of the afternoon felt different. Guests approached Owen with renewed warmth. Conversations turned kind. Caleb beamed with pride, clinging to Seraphina's hand as though she were a fairy godmother who had stepped out of sunlight. As the reception wound down, Mara approached him. There was no bitterness in her eyes now, only something like gratitude. She thanked Seraphina for her words and told Owen she was glad he had come. When it was time to leave, the sun was beginning its slow descent, but still bright in the sky, casting golden light over the estate. Owen walked Seraphina back to his car. Neither of them spoke for a while, and finally, she admitted she hadn't felt it alive in years. Owen confessed that he hadn't either. He offered to help her find more stable footing, not as charity, not as repayment, but as partnership. He had a spare room in his apartment. It wasn't much, but it was safe. She hesitated, pride flickering across her face, but the exhaustion of months on the street lingered beneath it. She agreed to stay temporarily. Weeks turned into months. Seraphina found part-time work at a local bookstore, then gradually rebuilt her confidence. She read stories to Caleb at night, her voice filling the apartment with warmth. Owen watched her reclaim pieces of herself day by day. Their connection deepened quietly, not in grand gestures, but in shared breakfasts and evening walks. Healing doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it comes with steady sunlight. One afternoon, months later, Owen attended a community event at the bookstore where Seraphina now worked full-time. She was leading a children's reading circle, her laughter mingling with the bright afternoon air. Parents listened attentively. She belonged there, and in that moment, Owen realized something extraordinary. The woman he had impulsively invited to shield him from embarrassment had become the reason he no longer feared it. She had stolen the show at a wedding. Yes, but more importantly, she had stolen back her own future and quietly mended his heart in the process. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness can rewrite destinies, please take a moment to like, share, and leave a comment. Your engagement helps stories like this reach people who need hope the most. Special request, comment, second chances shine bright. If you believe every person deserves a fresh start. On a bright spring morning, exactly 1 year after the wedding, Owen stood once again beneath open daylight in a small park filled with blooming flowers. This time, there was no glass pavilion or wealthy crowd, just close friends. Caleb holding a small ring pillow, and Seraphina walking toward him in a simple cream dress. There were no whispers, no judgment, only sunlight and sincerity. Owen had once feared attending a wedding would break him. Instead, it led him to the woman who rebuilt him, and as he took Seraphina's hands in his under a sky wide and forgiving, he understood something profound. Sometimes, the person who steals the show is the one the world tried hardest to overlook, and sometimes the most beautiful beginnings happen in the brightest part of the day.